2018 was supposed to be the year Nigeria consolidated on its recovery from recession, which it exited the year before. But the recovery has been anything but smooth. It's been slow and quite painstaking. First quarter GDP of 2018 came in at 1.95%, but by the second quarter, it was slower at 1.50% and marginally back up to 1.81% in the third quarter. The figures were a far cry from the government's projection of 3.5% and quite lower than the country's projected population growth rate of around 3% annually.
The non-oil sector still have, it's not performing as well as it should. And that is why we haven't seen the kind of dramatic improvements in growth.
But the good news for Nigeria is that for the better part of 2018, inflation trended downwards. Despite that, though, the country's central bank still maintained a tighter monetary policy stance all through the year in order to stabilize the exchange rate.
The central bank is doing everything to maintain exchange rate stability, and it cannot really afford to, at this point in time, when the country is approaching a national election, to allow Naira to devalue materially. But its capacity to maintain that, or how long it can continue to support the market and support the exchange rate, will depend on what happens in the crude oil price market.
Another major highlight for Nigeria in 2018 is the country's budget impasse. After several back and forth between the executive and the legislature, Parliament approved the budget in May, while the President signed it into law in June, 6 clear months into the year. The budget delay further compounded issues for the Nigerian stock market, which also took a big hit from the political tension in the country over next year's election. As at September, the market's all-share index had dipped by minus 11.3%, the highest dip on the continent at the time.
One of the challenges we also had was the slow reform, or the sluggish reform, or even the absence of reform in the oil and gas sector. This sector is very strategic and very critical to this economy. Our expectation was that by the end of this year, we'll have seen some significant movements in terms of reforming the sector.
2018 is also one year Africa's telecoms giant MTN would wish things had been different for it in its largest market. Just as it was coming out of a settlement over a hefty fine for breaching Nigeria's telecoms regulators' directive on deactivating unregistered lines, Nigeria's central bank hit it with another fine for allegedly breaching the country's forex laws. While its case with the central bank has now been settled, it's still battling the office of Nigeria's Attorney General in court over a $2 billion tax demand. Everyone thought 2018 was the year a Nigerian national airline was going to hit the skies after a very long hiatus. But after putting so much into the planning, the government suspended it over investors' apathy.
Only 6% is our tax to GDP ratio, is one of the lowest in the world.
Kemi Adeosun was widely considered a shining star in President Buhari's cabinet. But in September, she resigned as Minister of Finance following a media report she had forged a certificate exempting her from the mandatory National Youth Service every Nigerian graduate is expected to undergo. It's indeed not been an easy year for Nigeria as far as the economy goes. And unfortunately, the horizon doesn't look bright. Oil prices are falling, and if they continue that way, it means the country will face a further challenge in 2019. Of course, the government is doing all it can to diversify the economy, but it will take some time before the impact of that hits the streets. Deji, Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.